Winter summits are a different game than summer summits. Let's talk about some of the key considerations for those contemplating or those who have just started winter mountaineering. Hello again, I'm Jason. There are 14 peaks above 8,000 meters. The first one was climbed in 1950, while the first winter ascent of an 8,000 meter peak wasn't until 1980. And K2, which was first climbed in 1954, didn't see any winter summits until 2021. Now, many, if not most of us, will never climb an 8,000 meter peak, but you can see how, even for the best high altitude climbers, the difference between winter and summer ascents is significant. Now, I've climbed in some cold places, Alaska, the Andes, the Himalaya, but the coldest day I've ever experienced while actually moving on a mountain was here in Colorado at minus 35 degrees Fahrenheit. That was on a local 14,000 foot peak, or a 14er, in winter. Today we're going to talk about some of the things we want to be aware of if we are new to or just starting to consider winter summit attempts. I'll use experiences on my local 13ers and 14ers as a case in point, but we can apply these observations to just about any summit that is below the most extreme altitudes, but high enough to see significantly different conditions in winter. So starting with the obvious, the biggest difference between a summer and winter ascent is that it's cold. As I said earlier, even on a local mountain only half the size of Everest, I've seen temperatures where frostbite can set in on exposed skin in a few short minutes. That leads to a number of considerations. Our water will freeze. We need to insulate it by having an insulated sleeve for our bottles or using drop pockets inside a jacket. We can also turn our bottles upside down so that if it does freeze, the ice forms at the bottom of the bottle rather than the mouth. Allowing us to still drink what remains unfrozen. And if we are considering an overnight or want a way to get more water while we're out, we will need to have a stove and fuel to turn snow into water, rather than a comparatively lightweight water filter. Now imagine an unplanned night out. In the heat of summer, maybe it's uncomfortable. In the stark cold of winter, death from exposure is a real possibility. In winter, I always bring my 10th of the 10 essentials, a shelter, and whatever I need to keep warm overnight. I find I have to be relentless about protecting my skin and my eyes. As I mentioned, the cold temperature means a risk of frostbite. I need to have my skin covered and protected from the wind. Sometimes, if it's cold enough, quite literally all of my skin needs covering. And we need to protect our eyes. UV rays bounce off the snow, and so our eyes can get UV from all directions rather than just from above. So sunglasses are a must, and specifically designed glacier glasses are better, blocking out rays from the sides and bottom. If we get sunburned retinas, we end up snowblind. Now try to get home without being able to see. Speaking of snow, it's caused the terrain to change. I might find myself on powdery snow that needs flotation, like skis or snowshoes. Or I could be on hard snow or ice that demands the sharp bite of crampons. I also may not know if my particular route is hard or soft with snow until I'm on the route. And then there's the exposed rock that will be slick with the snow and ice glazed on top, also demanding sharp spikes on my feet. So depending on if it's a gentle slope or a steeper ascent, I may rely on proper, say, snowshoeing technique or potentially my knowledge of using an ice axe and crampons. What the cold and terrain combine to create is an environment that demands I take more stuff. I'll put a link to a typical wintertime Colorado 14er gear list in the description. That means I also need to carry it all. I'll definitely have more weight. And what weight does is slow us down. It will take us longer to cover the same distance as we would have in the warm months. I also factor in the slowing effect of snow, ice, and more challenging terrain versus dry ground. In complex conditions, I may end up moving half as fast as I normally would have. Oh, and depending on where you live, you might also need to go farther too. Many of the mountains near me don't have plowed road access all the way to the trailheads. If you can, checking road conditions and recalculating your distance to travel on foot may prove very helpful. If I'm out over a longer distance and moving more slowly, I'm likely to also be out for a longer period of time, and longer durations mean more time being exposed to the risks inherent with the conditions and terrain. I try to think carefully about those risks because by being out for longer, I've just upped the probability that one of those risks become an actual issue that I may have to deal with.
You want to go pretty direct down first.
Some of those risks include having fewer hours of daylight. I also typically experience more wind in Colorado as the jet stream dips south towards us. I'll likely have cornices to navigate, and I try to be sure not to cross the boundary of where the snow is supported by the rock of the mountain and where it isn't, and thus can collapse. And of course, there are avalanches to consider. In addition, small mistakes in summer can become big ones in winter. What if I lose a glove and it blows off or tumbles down the mountain? Do I have a backup to save me from frostbite? Or do my gloves have leashes so they can't get lost? All of this means I need more fitness, more knowledge, and more skills. We're carrying more weight, and so we may want to train to be able to move that weight up the mountain and at altitude potentially. How is my leg, shoulder, and back muscle endurance? And how's my cardiovascular fitness? We may need to be more specific with planning. Where is the winter access to the start of the climb? Does the route change to avoid avalanche terrain? Do I remember the content of my avalanche courses to know what terrain and snow conditions increase my risk? And we may need to call on more sophisticated skills. It's likely that ice axe and crampon techniques need to be second nature unless we're on a very gradual ascent. In which case, do we know how to use and manage our snowshoes or skis? What if they break? Can we fix them? Wallowing through unconsolidated snow without flotation is actually very, very difficult and can easily waste hours of time, increasing my risk to darkness and exposure.
Son of a...
And if something does happen, and we're out there for longer than we planned, do we know the basics of winter first aid? Can we deal with minor frostbite? Do we know the signs of hypothermia? Fitness, knowledge, and skills. They weigh nothing and are our greatest ally against harsh conditions. What is drawing you to winter summits? Or maybe, what is giving you pause? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching this video. Please like, subscribe, do all the things. And for more information, you can go to our website at www.shortguysbetaworks.com, or you can check out this video on how to use your ice axe, or this entire series called Cold, to go deeper into these issues and get some specifics on topics like clothing, traction, and behaviors and tips that can help keep us warm. We'll see you next week and keep on getting more out of that big outside.